chosen one, it was not a coincidence that you were told to watch this alone. Pause right now. Stop scrolling. Stop doing multiple things at once. Do not divide your attention between this message and something else. If there are people near you, this is not meant for them. If it is loud around you, turn off the noise. If your mind is occupied with plans, thoughts about the future, or worries, set all of that aside. Because God did not interrupt your day for nothing. This cannot be heard in small pieces. This is not a message that can be taken in only partially. These are words that must be received completely, in silence, without anything else competing for your attention. If you cannot give your full attention right now, simply save it and come back later. Because what is being said requires all of you, not just half. Breathe in. Really breathe. Feel how your chest is more tense than it should be. Notice how your thoughts are louder than usual. Pay attention to how your spirit feels crowded, even when you are physically alone. This is not a coincidence. This is not simply fatigue or stress. This is a spiritual movement. And that is precisely why God has drawn you away from everything and everyone, to explain to you what is truly happening and why you must remain a little longer in the silence. Let us begin with what is most important. The reason you were told to receive this alone is that what God is now revealing to you cannot pass through the filters of other people's opinions, doubts, and energies. There are truths so personal, so precisely timed, and so specifically directed at you that the presence of other people would weaken their power. This is one of those moments. This is one of those messages that only makes sense to the person it is meant for. For everyone else, these are just words. For you, they are a confirmation. You have been feeling somewhat distant lately, have you not? Not only physically lonely, but also emotionally and spiritually removed, as if you are among people, but not truly connected to anyone. Conversations happen around you, but they do not reach you. Your body is here, but your spirit seems to be somewhere else. And you wonder what is wrong with you, whether you are driving yourself into isolation, whether you are becoming cold, whether you yourself are pushing people away. But what if it is exactly the opposite? What if this is not isolation, but protection? What if God is not removing you, but protecting you, wrapping you in a spiritual cocoon, shielding you from noise, drama, expectations, opinions, and even well-meaning but disruptive voices? Because you're currently in a process of development. You're changing. You are recalibrating. You are going through a profound renewal that is not possible in public. This does not happen in conversations. It does not happen while you're trying to explain yourself to those who cannot understand you anyway. That is why God has removed the audience. He has cleansed the space. He has silenced the unnecessary voices. Not to punish you with loneliness, but to protect you during this transitional phase. And this protection was necessary because you were being tested, possibly by more than one person. Not openly and crudely, but subtly and deliberately. Questions were asked that reopened old wounds. Topics were raised that were known to trigger you. Remarks were made that seemed harmless, but left an aftertaste. And the most difficult thing about it is that you cannot point to it directly, because outwardly everything looks normal. But your spirit feels it. Your inner sensitivity perceives what the mind cannot prove. And you have caught yourself thinking that you must be going crazy because you're reacting to things that were not technically attacks. But they were. A smile does not make a knife harmless. A gentle tone does not make an intention safe. Care can be a mask used to test whether you will break down, justify yourself, or go on the defensive. God saw that. He felt it, and he said, "Enough." That is precisely why you were separated. That is precisely why you are being told to remain silent a little longer. Because if you begin now to explain yourself, to defend yourself, to prove yourself, you are giving access to those who no longer have permission to enter your next level. And this is crucial to understand. Not everyone who had access to your previous phase has the right to the next one. Not everyone who knew the old version of you needs to know the new one. Old patterns are losing their power. You are no longer reacting automatically. A pause is forming between the stimulus and the response. And it is precisely in this pause that freedom is born. You are becoming less predictable. You are becoming conscious. Perhaps you have noticed that some people are behaving strangely toward you. Some have become colder, some have become sharper. Some, on the contrary, have become overly intrusive. This is not a coincidence. When you change, the people around you feel it, even if they are not consciously aware of it. Your silence unsettles them, because before you were predictable, and now you are not. And this forces them to confront themselves. That is not comfortable for everyone. Some will try to return you to your former state. They will remind you of how you used to be. They will joke, provoke, and irritate you, not because they wish you harm, but because they do not know how to deal with the new version of you. Here, it is important to prove nothing, to explain nothing, to defend nothing. Simply remain as you are. People will either adapt or withdraw. That is natural selection and not a loss. You may even feel lonely among people, but this is a different kind of loneliness. It is not emptiness. It is a pause. It is a space where you stop filling yourself with the stories of others. You begin to hear your own, and it is only just beginning to take shape. So do not rush it. Do not demand from yourself a clarity that is still too early. God is not in a hurry. He is precise. And if you are being held in silence right now, then every word would be premature. Every action would be unrefined. Every decision would be incomplete. You are learning to wait not from fear, but from trust. That is an entirely different level of faith. It is now very important to protect your inner space. Do not let the doubts of others in. Do not justify your boundaries. Do not explain your silence. You are not obligated to make comprehensible something that is still in the process of developing. Even you do not yet fully understand who you are becoming, and that is normal. You are not falling back. You are going deeper. It looks like a standstill, but in reality, it is a fine-tuning, like an instrument being perfectly tuned before an important performance. The silence before the sound is always deeper than it appears, and one day you will feel a change. Not loud, not dramatic. A quiet inner stability will simply emerge. You will recognize that you are no longer searching for confirmation, that you are at peace with your decisions, that you do not need to prove anything to anyone. That will be the sign that the process is complete. When the silence eases, you will no longer be the same as you were before. You will speak less, but more precisely. Do less, but more deeply. You will choose not from fear of loss, but from self-confidence, and the world will respond to that. Not immediately, but certainly. For now, your task is simple and complex at the same time. To remain honest with yourself, with God, with this process. Not to flee from the silence, not to fill it with noise, not to underestimate its significance, because it is precisely here that what cannot be built in the midst of busyness is being laid. You have been feeling somewhat distant lately, have you not? Not only physically lonely, but also emotionally and spiritually removed, as if you are among people, but not truly connected to anyone. The conversations take place beside you, but they do not reach you. Your body is here, but your spirit seems to be somewhere else. And you wonder, what is wrong with you? Whether you are driving yourself into isolation, whether you are becoming cold, whether you yourself are pushing people away. But what if it is exactly the opposite? This is not isolation. This is protection. And God did not interrupt your day for nothing. This silence you are being held in is not only protecting you from the outside world, but is beginning to reveal you to yourself. When the noise disappears, the familiar distractions also disappear. You can no longer hide behind busyness, conversations, and the expectations of others. In this silence, only what is present remains. That is precisely why it sometimes becomes uncomfortable, because you begin to see the truth about yourself without any filters. You notice where you previously agreed out of fear, where you tolerated things out of a sense of duty, where you smiled even though you were empty inside. And this is not judgment, it is an awakening. You begin to understand that many decisions in the past were not made from inner strength, but from the desire to be accepted. You adapted yourself, smoothed your edges, set aside your true wishes in order not to disturb a balance that was never truly balanced. And now that God has removed the noise, these realizations are rising to the surface. They can be painful. Perhaps you feel shame for having allowed this. Perhaps you feel anger at yourself for staying silent when you should have spoken. But do not get stuck there. This is not a reason for self-flagellation. It is part of the cleansing. You cannot enter a new phase while carrying old agreements with yourself that were made out of fear. That is why they are being dissolved now, not loudly, not through scandal, but through the inner understanding that you can no longer continue this way. You do not want to anymore, and you do not need to anymore. You notice that your body has become more honest. It reacts faster than the mind. Sometimes it tightens, sometimes it tenses up, sometimes it repels. Before, you ignored these signals and gave yourself logical explanations. Now, that is no longer possible. The body seems to be saying enough, and this too is part of the renewal. You are learning to trust yourself. You are learning to hear what you used to drown out. Perhaps you are reaching out less, responding less, showing yourself less, and some interpret this as coldness, but in reality, you have simply stopped fragmenting yourself into pieces. You have begun to gather yourself inward. This is not estrangement, it is a return to yourself whom you have not felt as a whole for a very long time. Sometimes it seems to you as if you have lost your motivation, as if you once burned with passion and now everything has gone quiet. But this is not an extinguishing, it is a change of source. Before, you were driven by what was external, recognition, results, expectations. Now the energy is flowing inward to build a foundation. God is not in a hurry to elevate you higher as long as your roots are not firmly established. Because everything built quickly collapses just as quickly. But what arises in silence withstands the storm. You are beginning to notice that it is becoming increasingly difficult to be in places where there is no sincerity, where conversations are superficial, where values are blurred, where people play roles instead of being themselves. And that is normal. Your sensitivity is not growing stronger to make you weak, but to make you more precise. You can no longer pretend that nothing matters to you. You can no longer pretend that you feel nothing, and that is a sign of growth. In this silence, you also begin to notice how God speaks to you differently, not through loud signs, but through subtle sensations, through inner moments of pausing, through unexpected composure in situations that would previously have thrown you off course, through a clear inner sense of yes or no, without needing to explain why. That is maturity, when you do not need confirmation to know that you are on the right path. Sometimes it seems to you as if you are doing nothing, as if you are simply waiting. But in reality, an enormous amount of work is taking place within you. Old reactions are dissolving. Old patterns are losing their power. You are no longer reacting automatically. A pause is forming between the stimulus and the response. And it is precisely in this pause that freedom is born. You are becoming less predictable. You are becoming conscious. For now, your task is simple. and complex at the same time. To remain honest with yourself, with God, with this process. Not to flee from the silence, not to fill it with noise, not to underestimate its significance. Because it is precisely here that what cannot be built in the midst of busyness is being laid. If you have read this far and feel that something within you has grown a little quieter, then you are on the right path. That means you have heard. That means you are ready. And that is what matters most.